And here we go. We have liftoff. Propulsion continues to be nominal.
RCPA chamber pressure looks good.
Doubling up. Roger, with planet.
Water towers, fly! Yes!
Tango down to nominal.
Flight downside FT off. Bring in FT off. It's orange!
45. Oh my god! Oh my god!
Decollage. Put that in the big bag, Jingle.
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed.
We rise together, back to the moon and beyond.
This methane will be igniting in the flare, correct?
Yikes. You good? We don't need any more of these.
Good evening and welcome to Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. You're looking at a live view of Falcon 9 perched on Space Launch Complex 40, one of two of SpaceX's pads down in Florida. We're bringing you live coverage of the Starlink Group 5-9 launch tonight, scheduled to lift off in just over 35 minutes. I'll be your host for tonight, Ian Atkinson, host and reporter for NASA Spaceflight, but I'm joined by two other people here with commentary. First off, you know him, you love him, we have Alex. Alex, how are we doing tonight?
I'm doing super great. Yeah, it's an early morning here on the other side of the pond, and yeah, really cool to see another launch. Right, it's been a long time since the last launch.
Yeah, it's like Falcon 9 doesn't even launch anymore, you know?
Yeah, right.
It's a rarity.
Come on.
Great to hear, Alex. And of course, out in the field, giving us not only field commentary, but also some great camera views, we have Max Evans. Max, how we doing out there tonight?
Hey, good morning, everybody. We're feeling good. It feels kind of weird to say that it's been a while since we've seen a Falcon 9 launch, but in reality, it's been under 2 weeks, and we feel a little lackluster and needy. So we are awfully spoiled here on the Space Coast.
Yeah, and you actually brought up a good point. I said good evening, everyone, but it is 12:28 a.m. here on the east coast of the U.S., so I guess good morning, everyone. Rise and shine. But yeah, we're bringing you live coverage of Falcon 9 carrying Starlink 5-9 to low Earth orbit. Now, of course, this is a very interactive show. We love hearing your questions, comments, anything related to SpaceX, Falcon 9, Starlink. Hit us up and chat with @NASA Spaceflight. That'll let us know. That'll make your question pop up in a fancy panel in the background, and we will be able to see your question more easily and get a better chance of answering it. Alex, real quick, so we're looking at Falcon 9 here on the pad. What is it carrying to orbit today? What's the significance of this mission? What's the payload today?
Well, as the name implies, this is a Starlink mission yet again. There's a lot of Starlink missions these days, right? And this is gonna be one of those that goes to the second generation constellation, as they call it. So this one is gonna be carrying not the big Starlink V2 satellites. It's gonna be carrying the smaller Starlink V1.5 satellites, but to the orbits that are assigned for the second generation constellations, some sort of like Starlink Gen 2 orbits, they call it. And so this is going to carry 56 Starlink V1.5 satellites into that kind of orbit. The one that it is at 43-degree inclination. SpaceX is approved for 3 different shells, one at 43 degrees inclination, 33 degrees inclination, and 53 degrees inclination. Now, Starlink Group 5 missions are those sorts of missions where they go to 43-degree inclination orbits in that Starlink Gen 2 constellation and carry the smaller Starlink V1.5 satellites. There's the Group 6 missions where, they carry to the same kind of orbits the larger Starlink V2 mini satellites, but that's not the case today. And this is going to be the 10th launch dedicated to that second constellation, but again, there's been like over 60 and 70 or something like that of the first generation constellation, which nowadays it's mostly launched from Vandenberg these days. The booster for this mission, which you will see there, it's very sooty. It's launching for an 11th time today. It's B1067. Supported launches such as, CRS-22, Crew 3, Turksat, 5B, Crew 4, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of launches that it supported. And so the the oh boy, the booster for this mission, as you can see, it also sports landing legs, red fins, and everything. It's gonna land, right? That's the sort of deal that Falcon 9 does these days. It's gonna land just with the instructions, which is about 660 kilometers downrange in the Atlantic Ocean. So, another Starlink mission, everything pretty much what we expect. But there's a couple of stats probably here that we should probably mention. So
Yeah.
if today is successful, and I believe it's gonna be, because Falcon 9 is very successful. So ever since AIMO 6, the amount of missions that Falcon 9 has done successfully, it's been 200. But there was in-flight abort test, which was a suborbital flight, and didn't even use the second stage, which, to be honest, was the one at fault for the 2 failures of Falcon 9. So this is gonna be the 200th time a Falcon 9 launches successfully and completes like the sort of entire orbital mission. So it's the 200th orbital successful flight. I'm really hopeful it is since the MO6, which no other rocket family has been able to achieve.
Very cool. Some good statistics there, and showing Falcon 9 really hitting its stride and becoming kind of the workhorse rocket of the United States for the past few years. So really cool to see that that ramp up there. Now, real quick, we had a few super chats here coming from Musical Wolves, a regular on the stream. Thank you very much. And they are asking, how many more non-version 2 Starlink satellites will SpaceX launch until all the Starlinks they launch will be version 2? Now, Alex, I believe they're kind of slowly phasing in the V2 minis and then slowly phasing out the V1.5s as the V2s start to take over. Is that correct? Or are they two very different constellations here?
Yeah, so the version 2 minis, it's also true that they have just begun launching them, and they're probably ramping up now production. We've seen a lot of, we published this week some on This Week in Spaceflight yesterday, or the day before, because now it's Sunday here. We published a story about how they have these FCC permits, the Federal Communications Commission's permits. And from there we know all the missions that are going to be coming up, because they file for communications with the rocket for Starlink missions, for DoD missions, whatever, right? There's been a lot of them for Group 6 and Group 5 launches from both coasts as well. So we're going to see these kind of launches as well, but from the West Coast, which crazy. So yeah. There's going to be a lot of Starlink's Group 6 missions with those V2 minis happening in all over this summer and going into the fall. So yeah, it's going to be replacing slowly those V1.5s. They're still going to be launching them, a little bit of a trickling here and there of those smaller satellites. But there's going to be a point where all we see is just Starlink V2 minis. In fact, even for the first generation constellation, those satellites are getting older, because this month it's the 4th year anniversary of the first Starlink proper launch, which was a Starlink V0.9. That was May 2019. It's been 4 years already.
Wow.
So,
It's crazy.
those satellites, yeah, right? And those satellites, they have sort of like an orbital age kind of thing of 5 years. So they're 1 year away from starting to replace them. So SpaceX, like a couple of months ago, they went to the FCC, hey, can we replace the satellites with this newer, type of satellites? Because the older ones are like super old from 2019. Can you imagine how old they are? So yeah, it's very likely that we even see those older satellites getting replaced by these new ones, and they deorbit the older ones. It's going to be a lot of satellites that they're going to be launching.
Gotcha. Very cool. So thank you for the super chat, Musical Wolves. That was a great answer there from Alex. We hope that answered your question there. Methane Man here, thank you for gifting 5 Red Team memberships. We appreciate all of that. And to the 5 lucky people who were gifted a membership there from Methane Man, be sure to thank them in chat. I think it should tell you that you got them gifted. I'm not too sure how the membership program here works, but I would at least hope that it does. But thank you, Methane Man. And also thank you to Aspire. A little bit earlier became a PadRat member, so thank you for the support there, Aspire. Now, on your screen, you're seeing Falcon 9. It is currently undergoing propellant loading. Now, RP1, or kerosene loading, is underway on both stages of the vehicle right now, and the first stage is being loaded with liquid oxygen. Now, you'll notice at kind of around the middle of the first stage, there's a white section with a bit of condensation coming around of it. That is the liquid oxygen tank, and you can see visible progress of how much liquid oxygen is inside the tank based on how high that frost line goes. So right now you can see it's around a quarter to maybe a third full of liquid oxygen. That's just a great visual indicator to keep your eye on throughout the coming minutes of the countdown. Now, moving on here, we got a question here talking about the trajectory of tonight's launch. And I want to toss this over to you, Max, because you are down there in the field in Florida. So Joshua here is asking, is this launch going to be visible in South Florida? Max, which way is this rocket flying? Is it flying to the northeast or the southeast trajectory today? And should it be visible in South Florida, you think?
So as Alex was saying earlier, it's Falcon 9 tonight is taking off on a 43-degree orbital inclinations. But what exactly does that mean? So basically, normally here from the Space Coast, the most common trajectories or flight paths are directly eastward into, say, a geostationary orbit or somewhere in the northeast corridor. This group of Starlink satellites is unique because they are launching in the southeast corridor. And so what that means is if you're in, say, Fort Lauderdale or Miami, or you might even see this across the state, probably in maybe Naples as well, depending on what your weather conditions are looking like. But you should absolutely be able to see this in South Florida. And especially with the weather tonight, it is absolutely gorgeous out here.
Awesome. Glad to hear. And yeah, we have a currently 95% go for liftoff, which is the best that you can get out there because the range does not do 100% go certifications because of one time where a storm appeared just above a space shuttle and they couldn't go for launch. So they don't do 100% go for launches anymore. So great weather out there tonight.
Is that bingo time? Because we just mentioned space shuttle.
Uh-oh.
Oh,
well, Chris isn't here, so does it really count? If someone mentions a space shuttle, but a Chris isn't on the webcast, was it really mentioned at all? I don't know. I think
it's
that's
in
still
chat.
Yep, Chris says bingo. Perfect. Thanks for the question, though, Benjamin. Sam Boyd here asking, so Alex, you were talking about the different constellation, or the amount of satellites in the constellation, how there's thousands and thousands of Starlink satellites. Sam Boyd here is asking, what are the pros and cons of something like Viasats, where you have only 11 satellites, versus Starlinks, where you have a gazillion? They're using the technical terminology there.
Oh boy, that would probably need a video on its own. But in short terms, there's a lot of things that are easier when you have to deal with a GEO constellation instead of a LEO constellation. You have less satellites to manage. As a satellite operator, as a customer, you don't need any fancy antenna that needs to track the satellite as it passes over you. You just point the antenna to the satellite because it's fixed in the sky. It's in geostationary orbit, right? So it's always going to be there on the same spot in the sky. It's not going to move because that's the whole deal of geostationary satellites. And that was sort of the whole reason for starting to have all of these communication satellites up there. Now, for Starlink, the antenna needs to, communicate with moving satellites all over you, and needs to have a lot of what's the word? Like the sky needs to be out of anything that blocks it. Like if you have a tree in one direction, it kind of blocks the connection and things like that. So it's a little bit more finicky in that sense, right? But in both cases, I think both do great in most kinds of weather and things like that. But yeah, the antenna for Starlink is way more fancy in that sense because it's like, it needs to track all the satellites. It's phased array antenna and whatnot. It's a little bit more. But, nowadays, the technology is pretty much, it's just you install the thing, plug it in, and that's the whole deal with the Starlink, right? It's simple to install. It's, you just let the satellite company to be the one dealing with how complicated the antenna is.
Yeah, it's got to be a very easy user interface. Just plug it in and it aims itself at the sky. Which it's a great way because Starlink's supposed to be accessible to anyone in the world. So you just plug it in and it does the rest. Good idea there. So thanks for the question, Sam. We have one here. I'm going to toss this over to you, Max. They're talking about what we're seeing here on the screen. What are the 4 towers with the blinking lights around the vehicle? So, Max, what are those 4 towers?
Hey, I am not falling for this one again. Jack got me on this. Jack got me on this one on the last live stream. So I think I said last time on the live stream that if this question came up again at me, I would just answer simply with yes.
Gotcha. I feel like I missed that live stream. I'm missing a bit of a reference here, but I get what
We
you're
have
saying.
a video about it from last year.
4 towers,
So,
yeah.
Yeah, the 4 towers.
Yep, the 4 lightning towers around pad 40. Now, real quick, we're coming up on T-minus 20 minutes, just under 2 minutes away from that. We're going to see a lot of big things happen in quicker succession around here. So the vehicle is still being loaded with liquid oxygen and kerosene on the first stage and just kerosene on the second stage. Now, stage 2 RP1 or kerosene loading is going to start to wrap up here in the coming minutes. Then we're going to see the large T-minus 20 minute vent. Now, that's a large vent of liquid nitrogen from the strongback, and they use that to purge the lines and clean them out. You don't want to have any residual RP1 in there. Now, once the lines are all cleaned out, then they switch over to loading liquid oxygen in the second stage. That'll happen around T-minus 16 minutes, so those are 2 things to watch out for over the coming minutes. You'll know the T-minus 20 minute vent when you see it. It is quite a little sight out there. I want to give a quick thanks here to Jay Gunpla here for giving 5 Red Team memberships. Thank you very much, Jay, and congratulations to the 5 people who got those 5 Red Team memberships. Be sure to thank them in chat. And also be sure to thank Moldy Space Industries, hey Steve, for gifting 1 Red Team membership. So whoever got that, be sure to thank them. Regular there in the stream for sure. Allfruit here, thank you for becoming a PadRat member. Thank you very much for that. We appreciate that support, and we hope you enjoy the emojis in chat and the other members' perks you get. And Mini Dr. M has upgraded to a Capcom membership. Thank you very much for that. We hope you enjoy all the extra perks that come along with that, including access to our Discord server. That comes with the Capcom role, so enjoy all the great conversations and memes that happen in there.
There
and
we
as
go.
I mentioned a minute
That's
ago,
T-minus 20-minute event is about started.
There we
Yep.
go. So that signals we're around T-minus 20 minutes in the countdown, again, as a great signal that all is going well in propellant loading, and that signifies the Stage 2 propellant loading is now shifting from RP1 to liquid oxygen loading. So great signs there as we continue the countdown of the vehicle. Now, second stage...
Once that vent... Oh, I was going to say that
Alex.
once that vent goes out, you know it's already begun the Stage 2. Like, it's to the second.
Yeah. Very cool to see. Always a nice sight too. And it's also a good indicator of how windy it is. With a vent that large, you can tell there's not too much wind out there tonight. Sometimes it gets real windy and you could see it just throwing the gases around in the air there. Question here by Second Stage Anomaly. That username's a little tedious here with Falcon 9, saying, what does SpaceX do with the Starlink satellites that aren't operational? Seems to be quite a lot of them from what they saw in the latest This Week in Space video. So what they do with those Starlink satellites that either fail their initial testing or just straight up don't work at all, or ones that they retire, they will actively deorbit them. But if they're unable to deorbit them, say if they lose control of the satellites or their engines don't work or the satellites die altogether, the satellites are thankfully in a low enough orbit that they can passively deorbit themselves over just a few weeks to a few months. So the satellites today are being deployed into around a 290 by 340 kilometer low Earth orbit. That's pretty low for an orbit, and they put it there for a reason, because like I said, if a satellite fails during initial testing, or if it can't orbit raise properly, it'll just safely deorbit itself over a few weeks, leaving very little debris in orbit. So good orbital cleanliness there from SpaceX. And yeah,
I believe there's also, because the video talk about how many they had launch, how many they had in orbit, and how many they had in operational orbits. And I think that's probably what they're asking here, that, you know, there's like over 4,000 of them are in orbit, but there's only like 3,400 and something. I don't remember the exact number, but I do remember that of like the difference there of like 600 more or less satellites. Of those 600, 500 and something are just satellites that are still, that, you know, they have launched recently, and they are still going up to their operational orbit. So that's the difference there in that number. Where what, as you mentioned, Ian, once they launch it, they don't launch it directly into their final orbits. They let them, with their ion thrusters, they let them check out, they test them and things like that, and then they raise the orbits, they put it in the right position, because there's a lot of satellites, so they need to carefully coordinate all of these movements in the constellation until they go into their operational orbits. And that's the sort of dissonance here between one number and the other.
Gotcha, very cool. And you can see on screen the T-minus 20-minute vent is still continuing. That's going to go for just a few more seconds here, and in a minute they're going to switch over from RP1 loading, or they're going to switch over to liquid oxygen loading on the second stage there. You can see the vent is kind of starting to teeter out there a bit. So thank you for the question there, second stage anomaly. Alex, you were mentioning a bit about how many Starlinks are in orbit right now. Bill here has a question saying, what are the FCC requirements that SpaceX is required to meet? As in, how many satellites and launched by when? So we know they do have some kind of deadlines they need to meet. Alex, do you have any numbers on exactly which they need?
Yeah, I believe it is somewhere around half of the constellation by 5 years, I think, since it was approved. And something around 3/4 or something like that, 2/3 in 7 years or something. I don't fully remember on the when they the exact numbers, but yeah. And the satellites for the first generation, they approved all of them. That was 4,428 satellites. But for the second generation, SpaceX plans to put basically about 30,000, and the FCC was like, wait, hold on, that's a lot of satellites. Let's approve you 7,200 for now, and then we'll see about the others, right? It's still a lot of satellites. They're probably going to take quite a few years to launch them. So it's not going to be, stalling SpaceX. Oh, it's going to be the end of SpaceX with a Starlink. Nah, it's, they're starting right now to launch them. Heck, it's going to take a long while until they get to 30,000, right? So with just 2,200, 700 and 200, 7,200 satellites, they're going to be very busy with those satellites. I don't know what's happening today with all the numbers. There's so many of them.
There's a lot of numbers to keep track of here, and if anyone out here really likes the numbers and the exact data on what Starlink is doing and how SpaceX is deploying them, be sure to check out Dr. Jonathan McDowell on Twitter.
Yep.
He's at Planet4589. Man does incredible amounts of data tracking on how Starlink deployment is going, what satellites are alive, which ones are orbit raising. It's a crazy amount of data. So yeah, great work by Dr. McDowell there.
Yeah.
Traveling Guy here is asking how much would it cost to send a nano satellite onto orbit with Falcon 9? And I actually did some quick math here while Alex was answering the previous question. So SpaceX does have a program called the rideshare or transporter missions, and they advertise $275,000 to get a 50-kilogram satellite to sun synchronous orbit. Did a little bit of math there, and that comes down to about $5,500 per kilogram. So quite a lot of money for, the average person, but in terms of orbital launch capability, that is incredibly cheap. And that is thanks to Falcon 9's reusability and just the low cost that it costs SpaceX to launch a mission like that. So it's relatively cheap in terms of, satellite and corporation costs to launch a satellite on Falcon 9, but not quite something that, the everyday person could do just yet. But thanks for the question there, Traveling Guy.
On that same note, SpaceX also builds and launches their own nano satellites because they now have Swarm technologies incorporated into them. So, Swarm was this company that had these little satellites that were like the size of the palm of your hand, and now they are part of SpaceX. So SpaceX now owns those satellites and also launches them. Like sometimes in some random transporter mission, there's some of these little satellites, and now they are SpaceX satellites. So there you go. They also have some experience launching this.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see what they use the swarm technology for. There must have been obviously there must have been some kind of incentive for them to get that technology and to obtain swarm. So it'll be interesting to see if they bring any technology from that into Starlink or use the swarm satellites overall. That'll be interesting to keep an eye on there. Kresimir here, thank you for becoming a Red Team member. We appreciate that support there, and we hope you enjoy all the perks that come there with your membership. Now we're coming up here on T-minus 12 minutes. We are now into second stage liquid oxygen loading, and actually if you look towards the middle of the second stage there on the screen, you can see a bit of condensation beginning to form there as the liquid oxygen tank gets filled. Meanwhile, on the first stage it is about 80% full of liquid oxygen, it seems. So again, seems that all is going well here in the countdown. We're going to be coming up. The next major event will be engine chill, beginning at T-minus 7 minutes. Now, real quick, moving on to another question here. Allison is asking, I'm going to send this over to you, Alex. What would happen if Amazon, or what's happening to Amazon's license since they haven't launched a Kuiper satellite yet? Is that kind of a placeholder, or is that something they can lose if they don't launch a satellite on time, based on your experience with Starlink?
Well, yeah, if they don't, I believe the rules of launch these many this percentage of the constellation by this date, that is sort of the same thing for all of the operators. So I believe they probably have to launch like about half of all the satellites in like 4 or 5 years. So yeah, if that doesn't happen, they could get in a bit of trouble there. I do not think they just remove the license from you. They just more like, it's more of a little bit of a nagging there of, what are you doing? Why are you not launching your satellites, right? Because it's fair from the FCC point of view that you're approved for launching these satellites and you're not launching them at the rate you said you were going to launch them, right? Probably should have reconsidered your license in that case. So yeah, I'm not sure because Vulcan, it's undergoing pre-launch testing for the first launch. After that, there's a couple of missions that are not for Kuiper at all. We don't know when these satellites are going to be going up. It's going to be probably a year or so until we see those going up. So, not sure if, we'll have to see what they do, what happens.
You're right. We haven't heard anything really in terms of when Kuiper is beginning to launch. We know they're going to be using Atlas 551 rockets, but we don't know when, and we don't know how many satellites. We don't know anything about Kuiper really, that's going to be something we're going to really need to keep an eye out in the coming months, really, for any data on that. Real quick, I want to thank Rick here, aka Methane Man, for a $100 tip, saying,
Wow.
This is Methane Man. Y'all keep up the great work. I, for one, enjoy the people and the content that this channel provides. To the mods, we thank you for keeping us in line. First off, thank you to the mods, but Methane Man, or Rick, excellent. Thank you so much for that support. That means so much, and that really, really goes a long way to making streams like this happen. For the gear that Max is going to be tracking this rocket launch with in over 9 minutes, all of that, thank you so much for all the support. It really goes such a long way. Thank you also to Mark here with a $5 super chat saying we need to start a fundraiser for an NSF rideshare sat for more video coverage. Let's help them get a 1 kilogram small sat in orbit from Falcon 9. Do not tell DOS that, because DOS will try his best to get that. But thank you, Mark, and thank you, Rick, for the support. And thank you, everyone who supported us tonight. And if you want to really support us in a way that, you get a great reward, a great return back from, head over to shop.nasaspaceflight.com. We have tons and tons of different designs, from t-shirts to hoodies to mugs. We have tons and tons of metal prints. You can see here, we've got a Falcon 9 launch tonight. We got some Falcon 9 hoodies showing the launch, entry, and landing engine configurations here. A lot of really interesting designs here. A lot of Starship metal prints. We got a lot of Falcon 9 metal prints. Any rocket you can really think of, we have content in the store for that. So once again, shop.nasaspaceflight.com. It seriously goes a long way to helping make live streams like this possible, and you get a pretty cool thing in return. I got a few shirts. I've got a metal print. I love them also. Once again, thank you to everyone who supported us tonight, and thank you to everyone supporting us through the shop. Real quick, Mitch Shekel came here with a Pad Rat membership. Thank you very much, Mitch, and we hope you enjoy all the perks that come along with your membership. Wolfram here has gifted 5 red team memberships to the community. Thank you very much, Wolfram. And you know the drill. Anyone in chat who got a gifted membership from Wolfram, be sure to thank them. And oh wow, we just got a $50 super chat here from someone, Overflow. Thank you very much for that. They didn't leave a message, but that still means a heck of a lot. Thank you so much for all that support. And yeah, Overflow and Rick really coming out to help us tonight. Mark Lamb here with another $5 super chat saying, "Hey DOS, I want to help you launch a small sat on Falcon 9 to increase video coverage." You don't give him these ideas. DOS isn't here right now, but you don't want to. He's already so busy with project. I don't think he has time for a small sat, unfortunately. But man, I would love to see that. But thank you for the super chats, Mark. We appreciate that. Now we're coming up here T-minus 7 minutes. Once we hit T-minus 7 minutes, the engine chill on the 9 Merlin 1D engines on the first stage will begin. Now that's when they're going to flow a small amount of liquid oxygen through the engines to start to thermally condition them so you don't get any thermal shock right at engine ignition. Now the reason you want to do that is because Falcon 9 uses really, really cold liquid oxygen and pretty cold RP1 to burn in the engines. And as such, you really don't want to suddenly subject the engines to going from tropical Florida temperatures to negative 180 degrees Celsius. That will thermally shock your engines, much like, say, pouring something really, really hot onto a plate, cracking a glass plate from that thermal shock. You can basically do that to your engines. So they begin to slowly trickle that liquid oxygen through the engines and get them thermally suited and getting ready for liftoff.
Yep, just heard engine chill, and also stage 1 RP1 load is complete. So all kerosene on the rocket is already loaded.
Excellent. Glad to hear that. And again, we're continuing on with the countdown, just coming up on T-minus 6 minutes. Now, Max, I hear you got to head out and get ready to track this launch. So best of luck out there. We'll be watching here in the studio.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. I will see you on the other side.
Yes, sir. Good luck and Godspeed. Now, question here. I'm going to toss this over to you, Alex, asking from David here. They're asking, what is the name of the drone ship supporting this mission, and how many landings has it endured?
Oh, well, today's drone ship is Just Read the Instructions, and today should be the 52nd attempt on Just Read the Instructions. The second one, because there was also another one way back when, which also had 2 attempts, but let's not talk about that one.
Throwback to the old Just Read the Instructions.
Yep.
I guess we could say it didn't read the instructions, but
The OG drone ship, because that was a really old one.
For real, though. So thanks for the question there, David. Don Clark here with a $2 super chat. No message, but still thank you very much for that support, Don. We appreciate it. PerkDube here won with saying, how much to send my mother-in-law? Oh, no. I think it cost quite a bit, PerkTube. I know Crew Dragon missions will go for around $55 million per seat, so quite a bit of money there, but we still appreciate the support there. And Elamad here with a $5 super chat saying they gifted a Red Team membership. How do they keep, or they were gifted a Red Team membership, and this is how they're keeping it going. So thank you very much, LM. We really appreciate that. We appreciate all the support from everyone during the stream tonight. Now we're coming up here on T-minus 4 minutes, so there's going to be a few events here coming up in pretty quick succession. So starting at T-minus 1 minute, we're going to get the flight computer beginning the final pre-launch check. So the computer's going to take final control of the countdown there, and at that point, the mission controllers are kind of out of the loop there. The computer begins to pressurize the vehicle's tanks to flight pressure, and at T-minus 45 seconds, we will get the final go for launch from the launch director there. Now, Alex, how are we beginning to feel? We're getting into the final minutes here in the countdown, beginning some final venting from the vehicle. Are you excited for another Falcon 9 launch? It's been a hot minute.
Yeah, so this stromac has already retracted. You can see there that sort of separation, and we should be about 30 seconds away from that stage 1 LUX load completion. So then the first stage is going to be fully loaded, and about a minute later it's going to be the turn for the second stage, and that's when the fueling is going to finish. So awesome. I just heard stage 1 LUX load is complete.
Excellent. So the vehicle is filled up with liquid oxygen on the first stage. Again, we're going through the countdown very smoothly tonight. Hopefully liftoff in exactly 3 minutes now. We're going to go through a few more questions right before liftoff here. Brian V, this question for you, Alex. Do we know if Falcon 9 has gotten down to around $10 million per launch, like what was floated around for a potential, or sorry, $1 million per launch as a kind of a future goal for reuse? Do you know if SpaceX has approached that price yet, or do we not really have any information on the reuse costs yet?
I don't think we really know those kind of numbers. Yeah, not sure.
Gotcha. Another question here, do we know if this Falcon is using the smaller Merlin vacuum engine bell on the second stage? We know they've tried that out on one of the missions out on the West Coast. We haven't seen it again since. Do we know if this is using that smaller bell, or does this need every bit of performance Falcon 9 can offer?
Yeah, it's the latter. You won't see that engine bell on Starlink missions.
Gotcha. Yep. So I know with Starlink mission, SpaceX is trying to get every little bit of performance out of the Falcon 9 that they possibly can, and having that smaller engine bell really just means you're losing performance. So it's not really worth the trade-off here on these Starlink missions, it seems like. We're going to have to keep an eye out in the future for what mission SpaceX chooses to fly that shorter bell on. And yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what they choose to and to not fly that on.
Yeah.
Now we're seeing a major close-down vent here on the Strongback. Now, Alex, this is signifying them basically closing everything, venting everything, getting everything safe and ready for launch, right? Like they're just cleaning up all the propellants they have there, so there's nothing flammable left in the Strongback. Is that what we're kind of seeing here?
Yep. And the whole rocket is already loaded, and it's already on startup.
Beautiful. So vehicle is in startup. We're at T-minus 1 minute.
And go for launch.
Excellent. We should go for launch. Now we're coming up on T-minus 30 seconds until liftoff. Now we're going to see the venting on the vehicle and the Strongback begin to stop now over the coming seconds. Now at T-minus 3 seconds is when we're going to see the engines ignite. At T-minus 0, obviously, we're going to see liftoff. The Strongback will throw back and the vehicle will clear the towers. Now we're going to get a lot of very loud audio here in the coming seconds, so we're going to see you on the other side. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the beautiful sights and sounds of Falcon 9 lifting off. Go Starlink. Now we have engine ignition. And liftoff. Falcon 9 carrying 56 Starlink satellites into a low Earth orbit. Look at it lighting up the night sky, turning night into day down there at Cape Canaveral. Vehicle's cleared the tower and is beginning to pitch downrange. Now stand by, in a few seconds we'll begin to get that beautiful crispy launch audio. Falcon 9 is ascending up through the atmosphere. The vehicle has passed through max Q, or the moment of maximum aerodynamic stress on the vehicle. Coming up next in just under a minute now, it will be first stage main engine cutoff. That's where those 9 Merlin 1D engines on the first stage will shut down, and then the stages will separate a few seconds later. But right now we're getting some beautiful visuals of the vehicle ascending through the lower parts of Earth's atmosphere on their way to space. And Alex, I gotta say, one of my favorite parts of every rocket launch is coming up here in a few seconds as the engine plumes begin to expand when the vehicle gets higher in the atmosphere. Always get some beautiful visuals there.
Yeah. And now in very rapid succession, just 30 seconds or so, it's going to be that shutdown of all 9 engines on the first stage, then separate the stages, light the second stage MVAC engine, and then a few seconds later, it's going to be the separation of the fairing halves, because nowadays they try to get rid of them very, very quickly after stage sep.
Yeah,
So it should be very shortly here.
Gorgeous visuals here as we approach main engine cutoff. And looks like we've had main engine cutoff there. Coming up next, we'll have stage separation and followed by second stage engine ignition, so watch out for that. And it looks like we've had second stage engine ignition there. That's a single Merlin 1D vacuum engine there on the second stage. That's going to be pushing the 56 Starlink satellites into a parking orbit. It's going to coast for around 45 minutes or so before reigniting for a short 2-second burn just to get the Starlinks into their perfect orbit. You can see on your screen there on the left, the fairings have separated, now exposing the 56 Starlink satellites to space. Now on the left side of that camera view, you can also see the first stage. The grid fins have deployed and they're glowing a bit because of the second stage engine exhaust still hitting the first stage. So real cool visuals there. Now we're coming up on a few minutes here of just second stage burn. Oh, and great shots there of the second stage burning. You can see the plume expansion there. Now that second stage is in the vacuum of space right now. That is above Earth's atmosphere. So you are seeing some great visuals from literally space tracked from the ground here in Florida. Now the next event we're going to need to be on the lookout for coming up in about 2.5 minutes will be the first stage entry burn. That's where they're going to ignite 3 of those Merlin 1D engines on the first stage to slow the vehicle down a bit, but most importantly to provide a fiery heat shield for the first stage to survive atmospheric reentry.
Yeah, it's right now in that sort of parabolic arc and about reaching the apogee there. And once they go through that, it's going to be coming down, entering the atmosphere, doing its entry burn. Should be in about 2 minutes.
Excellent. And again, still getting some shots there of the second stage continuing on its first of 2 burns tonight, making its way into a low Earth parking orbit. Meanwhile, like Alex said, the first stage is just coasting right now, remaneuvering itself for the entry burn coming up in about 2 minutes. You can see on the left side of your screen there, the Merlin 1D vacuum engine burning bright, making its way into orbit today. Now again, as we mentioned a few minutes ago, this second stage is flying with the full Merlin vacuum nozzle. It's not flying with the stubby cutoff nozzle that we've seen before. Rather, this is using the full nozzle in order to get every bit of performance out of Falcon 9 that they can tonight. We know SpaceX has been trying to inch every little bit of performance out of Falcon 9 they have been able to for the Starlink missions, and tonight is no exception.
Yep. That is the reason why we don't see the stubby nozzle here, because Starlink, you need all the performance, right? They want to fit as many satellites they can onto that Falcon 9, so you're not going to see the stubby nozzle on these Starlink missions. You're probably going to see them on other missions. There's an upcoming CRS mission, CRS 28, in about a month, and that will have the stubby nozzle.
Very cool. And yeah, like you said, the CRS missions, they don't need every bit of performance out of the Falcon 9. So that is something that they can afford to lose a little bit of performance on, but save a bit of money and a bit of materials on. But here with Falcon 9, they're going to launch it anyway, so you kind of want to get as much payload on there as you possibly can.
Now, we're not coming up on that. Yeah, I was going to say that entry burn is really coming up really shortly here.
Yep, and we got some shots there on the left-hand side of the screen. Vehicle doing a little bit of RCS puffing there. You can see the grid fins are getting a little bit of reentry heating now.
Yep, should be 1 engine, then 3, and then 1.
Now this is the entry burn. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, the sort of engine configuration that they use. It's 1, 3, and then 1 we saw there.
Sorry to interrupt you, but you can see some entry heating there on the grid fin, something I always love to see.
So crazy.
And lost a signal. Don't worry, the signal is often lost there on the first stage. That's just because it's going through re-entry, getting a bit of plasma blackout there. As the vehicle goes through re-entry, the plasma accumulating on the outside of the vehicle from the re-entry kind of blocks radio communications. Totally expected. It happens all the time with capsules and with first stages. So, first stage is descending towards the drone ship. Now on the right you can see pad 40 with the strong back thrown back to around 45 degrees after a successful liftoff of Falcon 9 there. Now the first stage is continuing its way down to the drone ship, now just 10 kilometers in altitude. Meanwhile, the second stage still has around a minute left in its first burn of the night. The first stage landing burn should be happening in just under 1 minute from now. Now again, this first stage is landing on the drone ship. Just read the instructions, positioned about 600 kilometers downrange in the Atlantic Ocean. This vehicle is flying the southeast Starlink trajectory, not flying up the northeast corridor tonight.
Yep. And this is going to be that 50-second attempt at landing on. Just read the instructions.
And we can see some excellent shots on board from both stages there. First stage is sending through the clouds now. Drone ship should be in view momentarily. And there we go. Grid fins, you can see maneuvering themselves out. Landing legs have deployed, and the first stage has landed on the drone ship. Just
There
read
you
the
go.
instructions. That is the 11th landing of this first stage, which now gets the designation -12. Now again, second stage is approaching SECO 1, or second stage engine cutoff 1. This is going to be followed by around a 45-minute a 45-minute coast. And you can see there, SECO 1 has occurred. Second stage is going to coast for around 45 minutes before reigniting again for just 2 seconds to get the Starlinks into their precise orbit. You can see there the vehicle is approaching, what is that, Puerto Rico it's about to fly over right now. Again, it's flying out in the southeast corridor tonight. And again, there on the right, you can see pad 40 strong back thrown back after a successful liftoff tonight. Now, Alex,
And
that
they
was
just-
oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say that they just called out nominal orbit insertion because now they are in the right orbit to go into, you know, that coast phase as you mentioned. So everything great.
Excellent. Glad to hear that. Now, I believe, Max, I believe we have you back here on comms. How was that liftoff there, Max? How was it tonight? The visuals and the sound and everything looked great on our view here.
Yeah, conditions tonight were absolutely perfect, both for audio and for visuals, because there's no wind out here, so Falcon was looking mighty white and frosty. And because it's humid, it carries the sound energy from the engines a lot better. So we heard it very, very early, and we heard it very, very strongly. So much so, actually, that we actually heard after Miko, we heard a pretty big gator out here off to our left-hand side out in the water start growling, because the sounds of rockets out here can disturb the wildlife sometimes and make them a little grumpy.
Wow. I never actually thought about that, but that's a good point. I guess it could make some gators grumpy. Yeesh. But thanks for the update there, Max, and great tracking there, by the way. Mark Lamb here, real quick before we wrap up, I want to thank Mark Lamb, came through with a $10 super chat saying they will continue their crusade for an NSF satellite. They shall endeavor to meet any challenger for a small sat. Just imagine the amount of discovery that could happen, just like Columbus or Columbia. Oh, brother. Thank you, though, Mark. We really appreciate the NSF satellite fun there. And the shuttle puns, too. I see you're trying to suck up to a certain Chris. Well, thank you very much, Matt. And Matt from Tennessee here with a $5 super chat just came through saying, what hardware is usually replaced on reused boosters, assuming they're in working condition? They're guessing not everything is reused. And real quick, Alex, I assume they do have to do a little change outs here and there, but normally the boosters don't need much refurbishment. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's usually pretty much just a little bit of inspections here and there, especially for Starlink satellite launches. They don't really go into a lot of in-depth on these boosters. So yeah, it's just a look here and there onto the systems and send it back.
Gotcha. Very cool. Thank you, Matt, for the super chat. We appreciate that. And with that, we are going to call it for the night. Thank you everyone for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed the sounds and sights here of Falcon 9 carrying Starlink 5-9 into low Earth orbit. Right now, the second stage is coasting, but we are going to call it for right now. We hope you enjoy the webcast, and we hope you have a great rest of your night. Thank you, Alex, for tuning in, or sorry, for commentating.
Well,
I guess you
also
did tune in
tuned in.
too. Yeah. You
Yeah.
did watch the webcast in some way.
Right? Yeah, that's true.
Absolutely.
It's always a pleasure.
And thank you, Max, for field commentary and camera controls.
Hey man, this never gets old. I'm just happy to be here.
Absolutely. And of course, we had Pat O back in the studio there, and Kevin as well. So thank you to both of you for pushing the buttons, pulling the levers, as Jack likes to say. Thank you to everyone who helped support us tonight via super chats, gifting memberships through the store. All of that, we really, really appreciate that. And thank you, of course, everyone for tuning in. And we hope to see you for the next launch. Have a great rest of your night and a great rest of your weekend. Have a great night.
And here we go. We have liftoff.
Propulsion continues to be nominal.
RCPA chamber pressure looks good.
Doubling up. Roger, Atlantic.
Water towers fly! Yes! Tango down to nominal.
Flight downside SPD off. Say again, SPD off. Off. It's orange!
Oh my god! Oh my god!
Décollage. Put that in the big bag,
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed.
We rise together back to the moon and beyond.
This methane will be igniting in the flare, correct?